I was asked to introduce my wife as our speaker this morning. I think almost all of you know her. She's been the volunteer in this leaderless group of ours who has arranged for speakers over many, many years and totally enjoys doing this for the group. And many of you know about some of her more esoteric interest in terms of things of a spiritual nature, and her stance of living in the not knowing, being curious about what we really can't see and touch, but is there and real. But only some of you know about her many years of work in women's groups. I remember the first, we've been married, or been together 16 years, and the first 8 years that we were together, I'd had to tiptoe in and out of the house quietly on Wednesday afternoons because there was a women's group going on. And so I'd sneak by the group, and somebody might have been crying, and others might have been using batakas and expressing rage. But Marigrace has done many of these groups, not only at our home, but in other locations. And in that process, she has developed many different skills in terms of interaction with people and how to listen and have meaningful experiences between people. So her topic today is giving advice versus deep listening. And it's something that she taught and experienced a lot in the women's group. So, Marigrace.
So Dana has taught me, Dana has taught me, oh, that's funny. I'm speaking and yet I have Sarah on the screen. No. Luckily, Dana is so good at cutting out and editing these things for you two. Okay, I'm talking, so it'll go to me. Well, I guess I've got to leave it on gallery for some reason.
We see you. I see you.
It's a difference between having sort of a gallery view or you can have the speaker view. So when Dana records them for YouTube, he said, change it to the speaker view, but it's not letting me do that. So anyway, so you know how the big things I talk about, you teach what you need to learn. Oh my God, this was really a case of that for me. I really want this morning to be interactive, and I'll sort of start with my own journey and some ideas that I have about this that has really changed my life. It's made a huge impact on me. So, giving advice is, even though we're well-intentioned, I've certainly been well-intentioned when I've done it. And I noticed this morning at the gym, here I am presenting this morning, and I slipped right into doing that with somebody this morning and caught myself, and laughed. I said, oh my God, I still so need to be reminded of this. As much as I have good intentions doing it, there's like an underlying assumption that the person receiving the advice doesn't have those personal resources within themselves to come to their own answers. And it really blocks the person from receiving it, to look within themselves to find those resources. Like, oh, you poor thing, let me help you. It's a disempowering rather than empowering and helpful. I think we all do it. I certainly do. I'll slip into it. But I just like to give some ideas about how that can not be helpful. It also can undermine people's ability to figure out what is right for them rather than what I think is right for them. It also, with a person giving advice, there's almost a putting myself above as if I'm a teacher and I know best. It can be a way of protecting me from being vulnerable, being self-revealing, having a facade as a teacher, and the person I'm giving advice to is somehow knows less than I do. I know for myself, and I've heard this from many other people, I've shared this with many groups of people, that I feel supported when I feel heard, accepted, and not judged. I feel supported when I feel respected and that my ideas are honored and reflected. I feel supported when I'm listened to without being given advice. Feeling heard allows me to find my own answers within myself, and I feel safe. In groups, I've learned that when I listen to others find their own answers, I feel inspired when they're working through their challenges and what they're facing. And in particular, in Mastery Circle, we're an independent, leaderless group about self-mastery, which is where the name comes from. We all have wisdom. We all are teachers. We are peers. From my point of view, the best way to give advice is not give advice at all, but listen deeply. So this is really self-revealing for me. I always thought I was a really great listener. People told me I was a great listener because they would talk and I'd have eye contact and be there. But actually what was going on in my head is I was thinking about what wonderful thing I was going to say back to them, what wise advice I was going to give them. I was really only half there for the person and I didn't know it. I had no idea. And I learned that about myself when I was in these groups. And when a woman would share, after she would finish sharing, we would do what's called reflective listening. So we would reflect back what we heard her say, which can really help the person go deeper within, herself, himself, for answers. Well, I couldn't do what I'd always done. I couldn't be thinking about my response. I had to focus on what they were saying. Otherwise, I couldn't reflect it. It's like, oh my God, how do I do that? It really took me quite a long time to shift to that. But I know there's a very difference in being present, 100% present for that person, rather than going through looking like I'm listening. I meant well. I just didn't know that about myself. So from my point of view, certainly from my experience, the difference between hearing and listening deeply. Hearing is really just perceiving the sound by the ear. Hearing simply happens. Deep listening, however, is something a person consciously chooses to do. It requires concentration on the person, what they're saying, what they're speaking. This really, I have found, creates a safe place to share the most tender places from the heart about whatever issues are being shared. It creates a feeling of person feeling supported and heard. It encourages the person to come to their own answers within themselves. And this helps to build self-trust, confidence, and empowerment. Like, I can do this. So I'd really open it up to the floor, whoever would like to maybe have some thoughts. I'd encourage everybody, keep it personal about maybe your learnings or thoughts about it. So, okay. Now, this will be included in the recording, so I always want to let people know that. So, anybody would like to hop in, jump in. Bonnie Walker.
Yes. Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Marigrace. I love this topic. So about 12 years ago, or 13 years ago, actually, I started the program at USM. And our first our first skills that we learned working in trios was seeing the loving essence and heart-centered listening. And I just remember that time as just being very special. Actually, for me, the first year was probably more impactful than the other two, where there was lots of learning. But I just love that, being able to not sit there trying to think of what to say to people, but to truly listen to them and be with them. And I had the experience with several people where they said to me, I feel more listened to than I ever have in my life. I feel, I would sit there sometimes and I would just be present with them. And sometimes I'd actually have tears streaming down my face because of some story they were telling me. And it just was so, it was so beautiful. And when we went later into the program where there was a list of all these things we were supposed to ask people and yet still be, just still be easygoing with it, I found that a lot more difficult, but I found it just wonderful to sit and listen to people. And taking it into my own life, it was a thing that really started to change in my relationship with my son, because I had been so nervous with him in terms of what am I going to do to say to him to help him. And it was even getting into how am I going to fix him? Mm-hmm. And when I realized that there was no fixing to do with him, it's just be there for him, let him speak, and just reflect back to him what I thought I was hearing him say, and give him a chance to really look at that for himself without me telling him. And it's made an incredible difference. So I would say very life-changing for me too, Marigrace, just as you expressed. And so thank you for this.
Yeah, thank you. I had forgotten to mention that about USM. Yes, University of Santa Monica is a transpersonal program, and how that's been hugely impactful. Just I so related to what you shared.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think maybe Lovita was the first one with hands up.
Oh, thank you so much for this topic this morning. I've been a very grateful participant and reciprocant of the women's groups, the empowerment groups, the crone groups that we have circled around and learned in and from, as well as USM. And I'll tell you, the power of one word being changed. The first time I heard in a group, and I have tears on this, it just took me so by surprise when it was the reflecting back is so powerful. And fortunately, I was in groups with very gentle women, very powerful women, very astute women that had the capacity to sit quietly and listen. And at USM, we would have triads. So we all got to experience each different position within a listening situation. And it is so powerful. And the sentence that would start with, "What I heard you say was," and that sentence changed my life in so many ways. And as we reflect back, and our observers or witnesses are there as well, one change of a word can make such a difference in the understanding, the healing, or the upset that it can create. And the powerfulness of that realization has been, again, life transforming. And I really have to appreciate, acknowledge, and forever be grateful for Marigrace and being the pioneer in my world of opening so many of those places, including the Mastery Circle, inviting me in to come. And it's been over 20 years. And I feel like I've come from the dark ages into a light of a different understanding and a heart connection. And my gratitude just goes on daily. And y'all don't know, but it's like little things around my apartment that remind me of you or that you've gifted me. I send thank yous. I whisper thank you all the time. Thank you for this. Thank you for that. Oh, look at this. It's like how my life has been touched and changed and healed and transformed from the experience that I said yes to. And I am hugely grateful. Thank you. Thank you for this morning, Marigrace.
Oh, thank you. I think Whitney was next.
Well, I just wanted to comment that very interesting you bring up the subject of mastery in this mastery circle. And I think in relating it to deep listening and non-advice giving, because I realize the deep listening that I've ever experienced has always been to give up myself or to give space to other. And I'm reminded of my husband, and he was 23 years older than me. And he was very masterful at listening because I would rant and rave and tell stories. And he would not respond. He'd listen. And I knew I had him 100%. I felt it. And then, but he would not respond. And so I was left to come up with my own conclusions. And it's just one example. I'm reminded of what we're practicing. What it is to me is that we are practicing mastery. We're practicing giving space or kind of the universe that each one of us individually live in, and letting it be and knowing that it has its answers, and that we're all divinely capable. And it is such a gift. That's what I've always experienced it as an extraordinary gift. And that we acknowledging that we are already a master, that we have mastery, and that others have mastery, and that we have to shut up and give space to that so it can gently float to the top and emerge. And I'm very happy to be reminded of all that this morning. Thank you, Marigrace.
Hedia.
Thank you, Marigrace. I love you, and I love that you're sharing this because it's a beautiful reminder over and over. And I want to add something that I practice because it's useful for me. When I went to USM, they taught me a lot of tools that were useful, and I keep seeking more tools in life to grow and uplift my life. My ego wants to say, be a better person. I'm a good person. And I always want to grow and be, live my best life. So what I add to this is when I listen deeply with my heart, and then I ask the person I'm listening to, would you like me to share with you what came up for me, a reflection beyond or my intuition, or do you want a tool for that? This is what I do, like tool of freeform writing or owning the projection, because I didn't know any of these things. And when people offer me useful tools in life, it's like going to the mechanic, they use different tools. I'm like, that's helpful. And I don't see that as advice. I just see that as a tool, because I don't know everything. And I appreciate when people offer me tools, useful tools. And but I ask, I'm like, I can offer you tools if you want, and that's usually useful. And it's connected. Like it feels like I'm listening, hearing, and I'm supporting the person on their journey, and I'm being supported on my path and journey. So thank you. I love you, Marigrace.
Love you too. Thank you for adding that. This morning when I felt myself going into advice giving, I stopped myself and I realized and listened, and then kind of reflected back my perception of what she was saying, and She said, yeah, that's it. Yeah. And then I said, I do have an idea about that, if you'd like to hear it. And she did. So yeah, it's kind of a learning thing still for me, for sure, especially in the morning I'm going to present this.
Yeah, it's a fine line between giving advice and giving support.
Yeah.
Like I need support, I feel like, all the time. I can, it's like, please give me support, but don't, because advice feels like imposing and support feels support. Thank you.
Yeah. So I can't see both screens, but I'm going to call on Michelle next, but I'd appreciate if anybody would tell me in case I'm missing somebody.
Well, first of all, thank you, Marigrace, for this topic and for the way in which you're sharing it. This is really powerful. And we also have discovered we all seem to, many of us have a USM connection. I attended in 1998 to the University of Santa Monica and a referral from a Seattle woman, Kumi Kilburn, who had just had experienced her life being transformed by USM. And so I made that commitment to attend as well. One of the things I do, I record my sessions with my storytelling coaching clients. And at the end of each session, I do reflect back to my clients the story that I've heard. Often the story between the words that they're expressing is a way of helping them see themselves in ways that they may not have seen themselves, unless somebody is giving us that reflection back. That's the power of that, right? And then I send those recordings on to them, but periodically I do listen to them. And I notice where I'm talking too much, where I may not be asking enough questions. So I use that as a feedback tool for myself so that I can really focus on what I'm there to do, which is to be of support to that person and to help them to unearth their story and to be able to share it in a way that it's going to have impact. And so I do thank you for what you're sharing, because I think for all of us, the tendency to want to help or advise or whatever is strong. And I think you're absolutely right. One of the most powerful people that I've ever experienced was my graduate school roommate at the University of Michigan, Lois, who never gave me the answer to anything, but she asked me the most thoughtful questions and gave me the gift of figuring it out myself, because she knew the answer was inside of me. And that learning has stayed with me for all these many years. And I try to pass that on to others.
Sam.
Nita
Yes.
has her hand up.
Oh, excuse me. Maybe she had it up before me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I just have one statement. This is so, we all need to hear this over and over. I'll never forget, somebody said to me, and it stayed with me, and I think of it all the time. I was rambling on about something, and this person said, I'm going to trust that you trust me to be the person most qualified to live inside this body and make the decisions that this body needs to make. And I just sat there and went, oh, of course, who am I? Who am I to think I know what you need? And it's one of those that's like etched in my brain. I trust you to trust me to know what I'm doing. So that's all.
I love that. It's great.
Yeah, kind of following up on what Michelle said. I went to graduate school in New York City to seminary with the intent of teaching religion and philosophy. But while I was there, I got into therapy. And I was very confused and immature and introverted. And I saw a guy, Mr. Owen. I don't know what his first name was. And he listened to me for a year. And it was precisely what I needed, because as a young man, I was trying to figure out who I am and what am I going to do in the world, what's going to be my career. And I have to remind myself at times of the importance of that, because, we're all always trying to discover who we are at this moment, or what am I feeling? What do I want to do? Why am I feeling sad? I mean, we're all always trying to figure ourselves out. We're very complex organisms. And to have people listen can mean a lot. And it really, I think he really saved me. He helped put a foundation under my life, because it was the first time I really learned to talk about myself and express myself. And in the process, I gained some clarity about who I was at that time in my life. So.
Michael has his hand up.
Oh, thank you, Michael.
And so does Tim.
I would say that the word advice is sort of a dirty bird, because it's sort of negative and it sounds condescending. But I would say that in my particular position, I'm frequently asked for advice, because I have, or advice, or for perspective is the other word. I just had it happen yesterday where a friend of mine said, well, I'm going to send this document to my billionaire investor. That's a loaded request. And he said, I really am sensitive that this is written correctly, and I would really appreciate your perspective on this. Is this written properly? Whatever. So he sent me the document, and I sent him back a response. And I said, well, I think you should have an executive summary in the top that just summarizes the benefits of the document, so you make it easy for him to read. And I suggested what that would look like. And I said, you should review this with your own, you probably know better what the executive summary content would be. But I think that would be, and he said, oh, that's perfect. So I think we should not be afraid in our areas of expertise to give perspective, but, not just sort of like Marigrace said, to overdo it. I mean, because people do need guidance. People often do need guidance or the opinion of others in certain situations, and we shouldn't be afraid to give that. That's all.
And what you described in your profession, I don't consider advice giving. That isn't what I'm talking about here. He comes to you for your guidance. So that's a very different situation than what I'm referring to. So, yeah. Tim, I think Tim was next.
Yeah, I have been in so many business meetings, and like you described, everybody's thinking about what they're going to say, and nobody's necessarily listening to what's going on. And that's a typical reaction. And I'm now part of a large facilitation group, and we study deep listening. And one thing I found that is marvelous, and this is someone who's done a lot of study and work in this area. There are 4 magic words you can use when in a small group and people are talking, and that the 4 magic words are, can you say more? So whoever is speaking is kind of letting it out to a certain level. And when you say, can you say more, it opens up. And what happens when one person opens up, other people open up, and the level goes really deep and heartfelt. Those 4 magic words really work. That's one thing. The second thing I will say is, for me, I try and listen and listen and listen. And sometimes I get an intuitive hit. It's not from the mind. It comes from heart feeling somewhere, intuition. And I will share that. And it has been 100% on and beyond every single time. But from the mind, not necessarily so. So I just find when that comes up and I share it, it's usually just perfect for the situation. So those are a couple of comments.
Personally, Tim, are you using, and can you say more? Just wondering.
You mean, do I use can you say more?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
Great idea.
Yes. Can you say more? One thing Emily used to say, those of you who know Emily, she would say, can you elaborate a bit on that? There are other ways to say, can you say more? But it just, all of a sudden, it just opens things up and takes it to a different level.
So that's really making a difference for you with listening, sounds like.
Absolutely. And it puts your mind, when you're thinking, can you say more? You're listening to them.
So you're listening more to them by doing that, sounds like.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may chime in there. Tim, the first therapist I had that I talked about, I don't remember a thing he said except and tell me more. And yeah, it was very healing because it brought me out and helped me understand myself better, discover what was there. So,
Linda.
Thank you. This gets me thinking about where I show up and where I am too big. I know in my therapy practice, I always make sure my heart is there, the heart. And I do a lot of, I'm a guide. It's like this, not like this. It's like this. I'm here. Now, Homeboys is really different because there's like 40 people in the class and they're all like, so much energy. And I taught myself recently, maybe I told you this, I taught myself to not worry about the time because before I was like, oh, they're talking too long. Oh, I got, worry. So I decided that whatever they say, I need to hear it. Whatever they say, I need to hear it. And it helps them know that they matter. Yeah. Which is the most important thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think Amy and Samuel have had their hands up.
Yeah.
Also Bill and Melanie after that.
Thank you.
And Ingar.
Thank you. I appreciate all the help there.
Good morning, everyone. I'm up in the Bay Area. And sometimes you do have to listen very deeply, and then sometimes you really have to walk away from conversations that are where you're not being heard.
What's going on?
Huh? Whitney, you're not muted.
Dog.
That's okay. That's so cute. So this is a really timely topic, and I'm just taking it all in and trying to figure out how best to not give advice. So thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
And I think Samuel was next.
Oh, great. I wanted to bring up a distinction in communication needs that I've noticed between men and women. And it's not always 100% accurate because we're all a little different as individuals. But I've noticed that, like with my wife, a lot of times she doesn't want me to help her solve what's going on. She just wants to be heard. She wants to vent. And that fulfills her needs. With men, we get right to the point and we try to solve the problem. And I think you have to take that into consideration, not only the individual, but the sex of the individual can make a big difference.
I appreciate those differences very much. And I must say, in our relationship with Sam and I think he would agree, I have really had to work at listening deeply and just shutting my mouth. So to give him the space to be heard deeply, to just vent. So, see, I think next was Melanie.
I think Bill was actually before me, but.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to say I love the topic, and it's an area that I have gained a lot of awareness about myself, I would say, in the last 4 or 5 years. And that coincidentally is about the time my daughters started having children. And I think I gained an ability to listen when I realized no one was asking me for advice. And I had really been a know-it-all always, and, you know, happy to jump in and tell everybody in the world what they should do. And, you know, it was kind of my shtick. And I have, somehow I think that, you know, that was how I realized nobody was asking me for advice. And I started realizing how I just had an opinion on everything for everybody. It didn't matter if they brought it up or not. I mean, you know, up right down to what kind of vacuum cleaner you should buy. You know, it was really a way of being for me. And I have so many great relationships, and so many, with most of my great relationships are with people who have the skill of being able to listen deeply, because I'm drawn to them and I can learn from them and I get heard, and that's what's so fulfilling for me. But I had taken to asking my family in particular, when I started to notice I had gotten off my shtick of bossing everybody around in every way, if they were noticing. And everybody was like, no, I didn't really notice. Well, take a look at that. You might, it's a big break for you here. You might appreciate it. Anyway, I appreciate it, and there's a lot of awareness to be had in life in that fashion, and certainly I have a lot further to go. Thank you.
Thanks. I think Inger has had her hand up for quite a while. Inger, you're not on my screen. Let's see.
She's
Inger,
there.
are you with us?
You have to unmute, Inger.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. First of all, thank you so much for the topic. Yeah, when I heard you were going to have this topic, I just had to come. It has been an evolution for me. In the 40 years of me as a psychologist, in private practice, I really have been up and down on this. I think as a person, before I learned better, I was really a living advice giver, you know, whether it was to my kids or anybody who wanted to listen. And the last year, when I was finished my dissertation, I ran across a woman named Marielle Fuller, who taught guided imagery using Jungian symbolism, and it changed my life. I trained with her, and the thing I didn't like about it was I didn't get to give advice, because as you're doing the imagery, it is a discovery by the person themselves through that. But I somehow always managed to get a little advice anyway, I think. Later on, using energy psychology again, it was working with the person's chakra system. It was their discovery, not mine. And as a matter of fact, I had it. They never told me what they were seeing or what they were experiencing, because that was their private thing. They just got to discover for themselves. So again, there was actually no advice. I did have a practice before each session, which was, I guess, very, very important for me, is to say a little prayer, which was, I'm here for good and for God, and please allow that which comes out of my mouth to be healthful and helpful. So I can't say I was 100% successful in that, but it did help a bit. So I think today, you know, at 85 and having lived a long life, I still feel that the most important thing for me is to hear the invitation. In other words, there has to be an invitation. I have people from therapists call me and say, I have a case I really need to talk to. Can you tell me? That's asking, that's an invitation. But to lay wisdom on people because you think you know better than them without an invitation is is my goal, to be able to do that. And I have to admit, I'm not 100% successful with that, but for me, it is something that I hope that I don't forget. Thank you so much.
Bill.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for this topic too, Marigrace. This is just wonderful. It's just opening up so much for me. And you know what I've been fascinated to do is as we, your wisdom and what people have added, I put together just a little template of how a conversation might go from my point of view. Starting off with what Ingrid just said, I'm here for good and for God, looking for an invitation from the other person, either said or unsaid. It could be a look on their face as an invitation. And then the executive summary of Michael, thank you. I want to hear how you are. Saying that, just letting them know I'm open to it. And then, as Whitney said when she was unmuted, what's going on? Unintentionally there. But it fits. It really fits. What's going on? Just sincerely and deeply. And then, Marigrace, what I heard you say was XYZ.
Yeah.
And then they respond. And then what I heard you say was, and when they're all done with coming forth with what I heard you say with, then Tim, following up with Tim's magic words, can you say more? And to me, it's just like it's just falling into place. So thank you, Marigrace, and thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I love that. Let's see. Who's that?
Yeah, Paul, Rena, and Pamela.
Thank you. Okay, so Paul, Rena, Pamela. Thank you.
Thomas. Thomas is waving.
Thomas too. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Sorry. It's hard to get it.
Marigrace, I also want to remind you that we have about 5 minutes.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so I guess be brief so we can all get a chance to speak. Thanks, Paul.
We need a second morning.
Sure.
So about 35 years ago, I was fortunate enough to be hired by this leadership consulting firm who coached CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. And at the time, I'm just a farm boy. I grew up out in Orchard, and if I hadn't learned to listen deeply, I would have been out of a job pretty quick. And so it was a baptism by fire. The CEO of New York Life doesn't want to hear my advice. He wants to be heard because he has to be careful what he says.
Yeah.
In the context of running a large corporation. So I was always the listener, somebody you could say anything to, and I'd always be on your side. So that's how I learned baptism by fire.
Great. Love that. Rena.
Grateful for USM training of, listening. That was very, very hard skill because I used to think, I have the wisdom, but I had to really train my brain. What I would like to add to this wonderful conversation is the power of not giving advice, but really affirming the feeling and the needs that somebody is sharing. I know with my husband, he every day gets up in the morning and he has comments about what's happening in the house and in the kitchen, and people are this way and people are that way. And I can get so easily into disagreement, and he's not spiritual enough and all this. But if I can just say, so you're disappointed and you want the kitchen to be clean and you really place high value on cleanliness, just affirming his deep needs takes away from having to have opinions and judgments. So that's what I'm developing more.
Thank you.
Affirming needs.
That's really a beautiful reflection of the deeper level below his words.
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm going to say Thomas, because I think Thomas had his hand up for a long time.
Right. Well, let's see. Am I okay?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Well, I just have one small thing to say in relation to Michael's thing. I think the topic is excellent. I think all of us, myself definitely included, need to review how we listen. The points are excellent, and I liked Bill's summary. But the one example that stays with me from years ago is that we should treat, when we listen, like a watch fob. If someone only asked us for advice, then we take out the watch and show them what time it is. But never, never do we give advice without them asking and to what time is it. That example just stays with me. Amen. And thank you for the topic.
I just want to interject a bit here. I remember really well, there were two different people in groups over the years who their way of living their life was getting everybody else's opinion on what they should do because they didn't trust themselves. And these couple of women, they were in different groups. What we would do is, reflective listening so they felt heard. And then we'd say, well, if you were listening to someone else sharing that, what would you tell them? Encouraging them, going back to themselves. And both of them over a pretty long period of time said it really changed their life with where to look for their answers rather than looking out here, looking inside, and they learned more self-trust. So I'm even cautious when somebody asks for advice. So just my 2 cents. Pamela.
Yeah, well, listening has been a challenge for me most of my life because I hear things beyond the usual and I get distracted very easy. So I look at people's eyes and that helps me a lot. I've been using a Google a lot lately and YouTube. I just went to YouTube and in the search thing, how to listen better. So, and what comes down is a stream of brilliant people telling you how to listen better. And I'm going to listen to, I'll make an affirmation. I'm listening better. And then, I'm not going to do the 15 of them in one day, but that should help. And you might enjoy it too. How to listen better on YouTube. Okay.
Thanks, Pamela.